How's everybody doing this evening? Great, good. Before I moved to Alabama, I worked at a juvenile detention center, and I taught horticulture and science. And the school inside the juvenile detention center was called Maya Angelou Academy. And I'm very thankful for Maya Angelou Academy because they empowered me to start a garden education program with the residents there. Now, at that time, I had no idea about the impact gardens and farms could actually have on real serious issues. I just thought to myself, I'm gonna take these residents out there, they're gonna learn how to grow food, they are going to learn about health and nutrition, and they're gonna learn that a garden makes them feel good, because that's what makes me feel good, right? But at the time, like I said, I did not realize the impact that gardens could have, that farms could have, until one moment in the garden. And it began with one of the residents, and I'm gonna keep his name anonymous and call him Tomato, okay? So Tomato had mental health issues. He would say things that would make your jaw drop. He was always being chased by guards. He was always violent. He could hardly read or write. But he was going to change my life forever. He was going to develop me. And that happened with one moment. So, here comes Tomato. He's transitioning into my class. And he has this flat where he's planting these tomato seeds there. And he's very focused. And already, that is progress for Tomato, because he couldn't stand to be in class for 10 minutes without getting antsy or getting in trouble. So he would plant these seeds, and then he would put it under our grow lab, and then he would run in, and all the other boys every single day would run in, and they would look at the lab, they would look, and they'd be like, Mark, the seeds aren't growing. Is it dead? And I'd be like, no, you have to be patient. Growth takes time. And then they would run back in, and they would see this little seedling there growing, and then they would be like, Mark, a tomato is gonna grow on that? And I'd be like, no. You have to give a plant a chance to mature in order to bear fruit. And so those plants eventually made it outside into the garden. And so the kids were out there, they were doing landscaping, they were doing gardening, and most of them were doing goofing off and a lot of talking, but not Tomato. For some reason, Tomato was really focused out in the garden. He was really into his work. Other teachers actually started coming to me and saying they thought he was doing better in his other classes because of the work that he was doing in the garden. So here comes that one moment. I'm sitting there watching Tomato, actually in the tomato garden, and he pulls this big, beautiful beefsteak tomato up, and he's looking at it with bewilderment and amazement, and he's kind of giggling but kind of confused at the same time. And what I saw happening inside of him made me say, Tomato learned how to take care of Tomato. Tomato started to grow. So that moment on opened my eyes to an infinite potential of what gardens can do to solve so many issues. First of all, before we go on, let's talk about these issues that I keep bringing up. Here in Alabama, we are the 4th most overweight state, and we are the 5th most hungriest or food insecure state. Now you might be asking yourself, how can you be the most overweight and the most food insecure? It's actually pretty simple. What happens is if you can afford food, you just get a lot of very good Southern cuisine that might not always be the best for you, and you end up gaining a few pounds. If you are on a limited income and all you have to buy is foods that are going to make you overweight, then that's a problem. Then on the other side, if you live in an isolated or rural area and you don't have many resources or access to food, well, you just don't eat much. And then, so Alabama, that's the state that we're in right now. Another issue, in an agricultural state, only 3 to 5% of all of our food produced here in the state actually stays. The rest of it is exported out the state. That is billions of dollars that we lose every single year of food that could stay right here and bolster the local economy, right? And there's other issues. We still have the same legacy of social justice issues. Those are still going on. There's environmental issues. There's gender equality issues. There's educational issues. There's all types of issues. And I am telling you guys today that gardens are the place where all of these is the setting where all of these things can start to be solved. So, what do I do to try and contribute to that? I work with Eat South. And we have a program that's called A Garden in Every School. And with A Garden in Every School, what I do is I go into local elementary schools, and then I teach kids, of course, how to grow food and about health and nutrition and how to take care of a garden and stuff like that. But that's more so the passive learning. More directly, what I'm teaching them is science, math, English, and social studies, using the garden as a setting to teach those things. And all of my lessons are based on Alabama State content standards. If you don't know what Alabama State content standards are, that means that the things that the teachers are required to teach anyway, I use those standards in order to guide my lessons in the garden. So those kids are going to be tested on those things. And so instead of learning about them in a classroom environment, sitting in a chair, they are being interactive in learning these things. And that's where the science says true learning actually takes place, when you interact with your education. So that's just still only one half of the program. The other half of the program, I train the teachers. And the teachers are learning how to facilitate those same garden education programs, and they're learning how to be confident gardeners. So by the time that I transition out that school, that is a self-sustaining garden. And I don't have to be there forever. They can take care of it themselves. Now, the interesting thing about this is that a lot of times when people who work like me, they go into a community and they're there to help, a lot of times we view ourselves as the ones who are there to help them. I mean, that's why I'm here. It's because they don't have many resources, they don't have much. I am here to do for them. But I'm here to tell you right now that that model is wrong. You are never going to have any alternative development going on. You're definitely not going to build any talent thinking that you're there to help them, and your development and whatever you're doing with your organization is going to be stunted. When I sit back and I look at what happens in the nonprofit world a lot of times, and I sit there and it reminds me a lot of European colonialism, when missionaries were sent into the Americas and missionaries were sent into Africa and Asia. And what would happen is that these people would walk in and push their beliefs on somebody else. And that is still happening today in the nonprofit world. And I've come up with a term for those organizations that are engaged in that type of thing. I call them neo-colonial nonprofits. How do you know if you are a neo-colonial nonprofit? If you wake up every morning and you have a nice sustainable income, and you drive into a poor neighborhood, and then you leave that poor neighborhood every day, doesn't qualify you, but you might want to start investigating whether you're a neo-colonial nonprofit. If your organization is not set up to empower the people in that community so they can do for themselves, essentially not even needing your services anymore, but instead your organization is there to do for those people, essentially making a career out of other people's misfortunes, it's a lot more likely at this point that you are a neo-colonial nonprofit. If you feel very passionate about what you do, and you're like, yes, I know these people, they need food justice because of all the issues going on, so I move in there and I force my agenda on these folks, and no one invited me, and no community feedback, then at this point it is highly likely you are a neo-colonial nonprofit. And if you've checked all three boxes, I'd suggest you just quit and just rethink your whole life. So you may be asking yourself, well, Mark, the schools that you work in, did the same thing happen? The story goes like this. One of the schools we work in, E.D. Nixon Elementary School, they got a grant for $5,000 to build a garden. And they came to us and asked us to build the garden. And then after we built that garden, we mutually agreed, let's turn it into an education program. Our other school we work in, Wares Ferry Elementary School, that school had gardens before I even knew the school existed. The principal reached out to us and said, can you come and do some education programs with our gardens? So the development actually took place within us before we ever thought about going in to develop somebody else. And so I say all this to say that no matter what it is that you are going to develop, whether it's land, whether it's a new invention, or whether it's a new nonprofit, just think about that reciprocity that needs to take place with the people that you are going to affect. Find your tomato. Allow that relationship to grow and be patient. Allow that relationship that with the people you're going to affect mature so that it bears fruit. And then one day, you will have that same experience that I had with tomato, where my development grew further than I ever even imagined. So go forth. Do not be a neo-colonial nonprofit, developer, corporation, or anything else. Go forth, find your tomato, and grow with your tomato, and realize that you are also the tomato. Thank you.